Fans of the Horus Heresy and Warhammer 40,000, thank you very much for joining me for the latest 8th edition Warhammer 40,000 Newsflash, and today's date is the 11th of May 2017. In the comments section of the last video, commenter and occasional agitator Stan McStump made the following observation. Surely we've reached peak graphics now. I can't see how you can improve them from here. Stan McStump, that is a very interesting observation, and yeah, peak graphics, it made me think of peak oil. Yeah, that's quite a profound comparison, isn't it? You know, have we reached the maximum limit of what can be achieved? Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. And I think it kind of reflects on the fact that, you know, our bespoke whiteboards have reached quite a good place. When we go all the way back to the first ever Newsflash, which was this whiteboard, and then look at this whiteboard, a lot of rapid evolution has occurred here. And yeah, have we reached the point of maximum graphics flashiness? Well, possibly, although as always I like to try and get a little tweaking each time. And today I've just put a little black line in here on our edge eagles just to create the effect of relief. And possibly controversially, I've changed our bullet points to bullet diamonds. Now, these require quite a lot more effort from the art department to produce. An incremental step forward for today. Who knows, we may have another revolution soon. That's enough faffing. Let's get on to the actual subject of today's discussion. We have two Warhammer Community posts that I'm going to be commenting on. The first is on Datasheets, the second was Faction Focus Eldar. Links to these articles are in the description. So the main focus of today's discussion is Datasheets, and I've written, farewell special rules. GW has confirmed it in writing in this post that they are ditching the universal special rules, moving to a much smaller number of faction-specific rules, and then all of the special rules with regards to units will be actually stated on the unit's datasheet. And the datasheet is a collection of all rules which relate to a particular unit. The example given in today's post is for the Tzeentchian Rubric Marines. A couple of videos back, someone was saying they were a little bit worried about if Magnus's forces would get would get good attention in 8th edition, and this to me says they are. And I'm not going to talk about the specifics of the Rubric Marines, however, check out the post. It's clear to me that they've got a lot of very deadly looking weapons, and their warp fire flamers look terrifying, to put it mildly. What I am going to talk about is what the datasheet actually gives us. Firstly, well, what's there? We get the unit profile, the weapon stats, and then model specific rules. So this model specific rules covers a number of different areas. You have weapon profiles. So for example, on the Rubric Marines, you have Inferno bolt pistols, bolt guns, warp flamers, Soul Reaper cannons, etc., and their force weapons. And then it also talks about the war gear options, and then it also talks about their abilities as well. They have the special rule of Death of a False Emperor, and that is explained in the stat card. Their psychic capabilities are described. The special rules for any of the weapons are also stated. So in this case, the warp flame weapons have an ability which is this weapon automatically hits the target. Then we also have what they've called the power level. And the power level, I mean, as a complete Age of Sigmar noob, even I recognised this from Age of Sigmar. And this is what I will call a quick reckoner point system for creating approximately balanced forces. The idea of it is for use in open and narrative play. I believe we're going to get something much more comprehensive for the tournament play section of the game. But it's all there on this one page, and it looks a very neat little summary. Now, I guess the question is, are we going to get cards, or sheets like this that we can have on the table or easily to hand, or are they going to be located within the faction books? It'd be nice if you could have a few of these cards just kind of like, in your hands, so you can refer to them and quickly leaf through them when you're playing. I don't know, we'll have to see about that. At the moment, 40k doesn't have anything comparable. You use an army builder app, something like Battle Scribe. These already do this function for you. So I build a force of Iron Hands, Sailor Auxilia, or Mechanicum, hit a button, and I get stat sheets printed out. It'd be nice if GW does this with these new forces. I would like to see that, and I think it would be a great aid to play, particularly with all the other work that they have done with streamlining on 8th. I think that would fit really well. In the article it is mentioned that not all of the information for units with complex or a large number of weapon options will be included on the stat sheet. So if we think about some of the more flexible units in the game, I don't know, perhaps a tactical Space Marine squad, they can have a lot of weapon options. And if I was looking to the Heresy, if I thought about the Black Shield Reaver squad, they've got an absolutely bewildering way of options. So what they've said they're going to do in the case of these, and obviously this applies to 40k only, I don't know how Forge World will approach it, they will put the most commonly used weapons and pieces of equipment onto the stat card, and then the more unusual stuff, and they're going to have to determine that on a case-by-case basis. The rules will be in the codex for that particular faction. It's a trade-off, isn't it? And I think that's an acceptable one. You can't have a summary sheet that has everything on it if it's complex. There's a trade-off there between stuff versus concise content for the sheet. The other thing of note on this was the inclusion of what they've called keywords, and there's two types of keywords. There are faction keywords, and then what I've called non-generic keywords, which they've just called keywords on the stat sheet. Apparently faction keywords are relevant for creating battle-forged armies, and the non-generic or standard keywords are related to general rules, which I'm not quite sure on this, because in faction keywords for the Rubric Marines, they have Chaos, Tzeentch, Heretic Astartes, Thousand Suns. Then in the keyword section, there's Infantry Psyker, but then it also says Rubric Marines. Now surely Rubric Marines would fit in the faction keywords, just reading that from the start, but I don't know yet. I'm sure that once we get the full rule set, that will make sense. Unless with Rubric Marines, that's a general rule that doesn't have any bearing on the army list construction, and it's actually the Thousand Suns and the Heretic Astartes that are in effect the army list influencers, or the battle-forged army influencers. So yeah, that's interesting. So moving on to a second post on the community website is faction focus, and this is looking at the Eldar. Now, I've just put a bit of comment on here because we had the same thing for the Guard, the Imperial Guard, and there was actually some pretty good information in there. Unfortunately, this time this is much more fluffy. It's mainly discussion. I mean, I say unfortunate because I'm looking at this from a point of view of trying to glean details of what 8th edition rules look like. The discussion is nonetheless interesting, and if you're an Eldar player, I think I'd highly recommend you check it out. And within that, there are some interesting observations to say that you will be able to make viable competitive Eldar lists without having to have huge numbers of Psykers, which is an interesting concept. So maybe something a bit more Eldar pirate style for those of who remember 40k Rogue Trader. There is one interesting little bit I'll mention on the rules. We get the rules profile for the spear that the Eldar avatar is armed with, the Wailing Doom. I thought this was interesting because we have another example here of a very high armor penetrating weapon, or a weapon with a high negative save modifier, and the Wailing Doom, whether it's used in melee or it's thrown ranged mode, has a save modifier of -4, so that ties with the Meltagun as the highest armor save modifier we've so far seen in the new rules. So I'm wondering, given that the last cannon was only -3, is -5 going to be moving into the territory of really massive guns and the sort of things that the super heavy class vehicles are packing? Interesting. Check that out, particularly if you're interested in the Eldar. And finally, just to finish up, the next post we're going to get, they said tomorrow is going to be talking about points and power levels. So this is going to expand on what we've seen here in the datasheet example of a power level. But I'm also very much looking forward to discussion around how the points system works, i.e. the balancing mechanism if you're wanting to play tournament style games, which is a third of the 3 ways to play. So what do I think about this lot? So what do I think? I think in general this represents Games Workshop catching up with a trend that has been common in tabletop war games for many years now, which is creating simple to use summary sheets for your units and condensing the required rules into one place. I mean, if I was to take the ultimate example, if you turn the clock back 30 years to when Battletech came out, they all had a record sheet for each mech, and everything that you needed to know about that unit in terms of its damage tracking and heat was on it. There were rules that sat outside of that, but it was an early, that was an example of this sort of thinking. And many other games have adopted this approach since. And, I remember I played a lot of the early edition War Machine game when I really got into War Machine. And back then we had the unit cards with War Machine. And again, that was really handy for giving us a quick, concise set of rules that you could play from, and you didn't have to refer back to army list books to play your forces. They also had the points value, so it's a catch-up for Games Workshop, but it's a good catch-up as well. What's the old phrase? Better late than never. I like the principle of it, the example of the rubric Marines given. I like the look of the information they're putting into it. I think there's a good balance of detail. I think the main thing for me with this, and this is something that I am absolutely delighted about, is this. We are getting rid of the messy, clumsy, cumbersome set of special rules. For those of you who have read any 17th century Christian allegorical literature and are familiar with the story of Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, these special rules are the great burden of present-day 7th edition Warhammer 40,000 players. They really have served to overcomplicate and slow down gameplay. So I won't be sad to see the back of them, and I think it's a great move by Games Workshop. So there you go, you're getting a special thumbs up. Nice thinking, Games Workshop. Really pleased with this change for 8th edition. So put your thoughts on these latest changes down in the comments section. Do share that and we can get some discussion going. Anyway, that is all for today. Thank you very much for listening. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.